Good evening, everyone. Welcome to State of the Snowpack Whistler. Come on in, find yourself a place to sit, or you can move up a little bit. You don't have to stand way at the back. Hopefully everybody has a beverage in hand. And my name's Richard Wine. I'm going to be your host or MC for this evening. You're not going to hear me speaking that much, luckily. In order to purchase a raffle ticket, we will need to go to these QR codes up on the screen. So these, all the money goes straight to State of the Snowpack, and we're opening the raffle now for the fantastic Polaris snowmobile. You need to be 19 years or older and a BC resident for that. And sorry, one sec. We know that Whistler Mountain is celebrating our 60th anniversary and 50th anniversary for the resort municipality of Whistler. But of course, we'd like to acknowledge that we're gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded homeland of the Little-Wat and Squamish Nation people. We're privileged and honored to be able to live here, and of course, we want generations of people to enjoy it for the years to come as well. I will read this. This is the disclaimer, and the information that we present are our own observations to the best of our ability. This presentation does not replace actual avalanche training. Sign up to an avalanche skills training or Canadian Avalanche Association course this winter. What you do with the information we present is your responsibility. Please use it responsibly. Okay? So what is the State of the Snowpack? It's a nonprofit BC Public Safety Society. It's passionate about getting the information, opening the doors so that we all can connect with each other and we're not just getting information off of social media or information that's outdated or information that is not pertinent to where we are. So State of the Snowpack, we have lots of different chapters. We're all here at the Whistler chapter, and the information that you're going to get is pertinent to right now and where we are. More than really anything, we really need to throw a shout out to our sponsors. Heli Canada, which is the Helicopter Snowcat Association for all of the operators around in the country. Arc'teryx, Polaris, Klim, Whistler Heli Skiing, and of course we're right here at Evo Sports. And let's give a round of applause for Evo for opening up this community area for us. Without our sponsors, it's difficult to open these doors for free to everyone. So it's a really important thing that we give that shout out and we patronize our sponsors. And through the course of the day, all of our sponsors that have provided the fantastic prizes that we're going to raffle off, and that includes Extremely Canadian, Granite, Profile, Ski and Snowboard, Whistler Blackcomb, which is local, Arc'teryx, of course, Cetas, Atomic, and Nestor's Market. Please, if you get a chance, go to the State of the Snowpack website. It's easy, stateofthesnowpack.com. Today we have a great program, and our speakers will get to Jerome and Gabe with Whistler Heli Skiing, and then the powder picker himself, David Jones. But before that, we're going to cover a whole bunch of things, but we're going to invite Eric up here to speak to us. And there's a lot of different type of, I guess, expertise in the room. You know, the guy standing in front of you, myself, for about 30 years, I led the public education programs for the patrol at Whistler Blackcomb. I've worked with a few different Avalanche rescue dogs, and I've been part of the patrol here. Most of our first speakers, they're guides, so that's a different lens on what's going on. So let's give a big hand to Eric, and come on up here, Eric, and you're up.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I am an Arc'teryx athlete and working my way through the ACMG program, so semi-pro half guide. I will try not to talk for too long tonight because there's a lot of pretty smart people here, but I do get to spend a lot of time in the mountains. I work for Zenith Mountain Guides and Coast Range Heli, and so yeah, I do quite a bit of skiing. But I wasn't given a whole lot of guidance on what to talk about tonight. I was kind of left to my own devices, and I've been writing an article and decided to kind of workshop that here. So that's what my presentation is. I do have some photos, and yeah, does anybody know where this is? They said you could just take a pair of boots off the rack if you get it right, so. Anybody? Come on, some of the old guys. It's better than Chamonix. This is in the Waddington Range. It's the, oh yeah, somebody cheered back there. It's looking from Monday, more or less, back at the Sarahs and Asperity, the Tiedemann group there. Yeah. But that couloir and glacier below it, it's about 1,800 meters from the top, the saddle, down to the glacier itself. So that's twice the size of any of the big lines in Chamonix or anything. And I get asked a lot about skiing big lines and going into the big mountains, and lots of questions about like how to level up and what should I ski next before this and that. And like a lot of those answers are often just be a better skier, like thinking about myself for sure. That goes a long way. And then you got to develop the technical skills. You got to learn how to use the ropes and travel on glaciers and belay across bergschrunds and all those things. This was a really interesting one. Lots of belaying across crevasses there. But I really think you have to adapt kind of your mindset and your forecasting abilities when you head into the big mountains. So to tell this story, or to frame this, I'm going to tell a bit of a story about a near miss that I had. So does anyone know where this is? No, it's in Canada. Yeah, it's closer to Banff than here. Yeah. This is in north face of Mount McDonald. So if you're driving across Rogers Pass, you go past the Discovery Center heading towards Golden, and you make that big right turn, and then you head down through those snow sheds. Tupper's up on the left. This is kind of looking back. I actually stole this photo from Matt Ruda, a friend. Yeah, you go under all these amazing couloirs and lines. And this is, I can't remember which is which, gully number 10 and gully number 11. But I was there a bunch of years ago, and it was less filled in than this. So typically you climb whatever this gully is. I think this is 10. And then right at the point here, there's a bit of a rib, and you do this kind of wild traverse. And then you can get into gully number 11, and you climb it to the top. But that traverse wasn't in, so we're going to climb to the top of gully number 10, top of that dotted line, and ski down. And the conditions were amazing. It was like perfect Rogers Pass skiing. It's probably moderate, low, low, maybe mod, low. I can't remember. I was skiing with a guide who is also a local, so maybe a bit of human factor going on there. But yeah, we felt really good about it. And so we climbed the line, because you kind of have to with this one. And we got to the turnaround point where we're going to ski from, and doing our transition, feeling great. And then I looked up and saw this powder cloud, and it actually looks relatively unimpressive here, but just this GoPro kind of capture of it, and realized that it was an avalanche, and kind of had that thought of like, whoop, this could be it. So hollered avalanche. My friends, there's two folks right there, one friend there, and I'm kind of standing just further down. We all slid off. We were kind of on a rib, just off this couloir. all slid lookers left here towards the edge of the rib. And, I just jammed my ski poles in, tucked my backpack strap over it and held on, had my edges kicked in. And the Avalanche kind of miraculously, that was our one thing that we ded right is ending up over on this rib here. Because the Avalanche kind of swept down these rocks and just like the inside of this couloir there. So in a sense, we did something right. We put ourselves in a good spot there, but ultimately we were purely lucky. It was luck that we weren't still climbing up the couloir, climbing right up the gut. We weren't skiing it, anything like that. And so we got kind of smoked by the air blast and checked our pants and then got the heck out of there as quick as we could. So, what did I miss? Obviously, I got home and I was embarrassed. Super shaken, super embarrassed. It was the closest call I've had. And immediately went to the telemetry. There's a weather station almost at the top of that photo to see the wind. And while it was calm wind the entire time we were climbing and skiing, it was actually moderate to strong up on the summit there. And so this face has these big snow patches that you can't see. There's 1,000 meters of face kind of above this, or maybe 600 meters, but quite a lot of space there. And so these big snow patches were just loading with wind all night, all morning, and then just released. So I forecasted correctly for the snow that we were standing on, but completely missed it for what was above us. And so this near miss really helped kind of reshape how I think about skiing really big lines versus touring. So I think of touring as an optional exposure mindset. My goal is to find good snow and to manage the avalanche risk. Terrain choice is really one of the strongest tools that we have. If there's surface horror, we can change the aspect, we can change the elevation that we're skiing at, we can ski on ribs instead of in gullies, we can avoid convex rolls, all those things. And it's really a good tool. And sometimes we end up, even ignoring that and not using those tools. But if we really manage terrain, we can do a pretty good job of it. Does anybody know where that is? It's here. Yeah. Nice. Sweet. Some of the musical bumps for sure. How about that one? Yeah, totally. That's the Angel Glacier.
Who said that?
Oh, nice.
Who said Waddington?
Old guy for sure.
Who said it?
Yeah, this is the Angel Glacier on Waddington. It's a beautiful place and yeah, really big mountain. So I think big line skiing is characterized by mandatory exposure. Terrain choice is really not much of a tool here. You are exposing yourself no matter what, really, whether we're in a couloir or on a big face, but in those big mountains. And so in this terrain, consequences that would be relatively small touring become really severe. A slough over a cliff. This is the biggest, most giant ice serac that I've ever seen. Getting sloughed over that would be very consequential, right? And so here I wonder, and this is what I'm kind of workshopping, if I need to move away from kind of this traditional, the conceptual model of avalanche hazard, 5 hazard levels, towards more of a binary decision-making system for these big mountains. So really like a go and no-go decision. And that's, I think, a question that I get a ton is like, is it good to go? Can I ski it? Whatever it is. Because in these mountains, even moderate can be scary. When we talk about moderate, the definition of moderate is that avalanches are possible. Human-triggered avalanches are possible, and they can be large. They might not be widespread. They might be in isolated places, but they can be large. And we go to those isolated places when we're in the big mountains sometimes. Where's that? Oh, yeah, nice. Sweet. Okay, finally. Yeah, I've kind of come along some practical tools for when I'm in these mountains. The first one is collecting data. That seems relatively straightforward. That's my lesson. And we've got all these great tools. The Avalanche Canada website is the place. You can go even deeper with the ARFI portion of Avalanche Canada and get all those weather stations and experimental snowpack plots and all that stuff. It's super cool. There's programs like this, right here. We do the same thing in Squamish. Lots of information. You can talk to people. You can talk to the patrollers. You can talk to guides. You can talk to people that are coming out, when you meet the person on the tarmac, wherever you're flying into as they come out. And then as we ski, we're collecting data that entire time as we ski, whether it's probing with our poles or feeling the snow under our skis or digging those hasty pits, whatever it might be. So collecting data is huge. And then I think there's kind of a few critical questions that I'm thinking about when I'm forecasting for this. And when we read the Avalanche forecast, the public bulletin, that's a region-specific bulletin. It's huge, right? Our region is massive. When we go guiding, we write a zone-specific forecast. So I might write a forecast for the Mathieu group or the Sea to Sky gondola. But when we're talking about skiing one of these bigger lines, we really need to think about a slope-specific forecast. So what are the actual avalanche problems that I'm going to experience on this slope scale? And then will I be exposed to them? So that's kind of the same thing. But then moving on to the likelihood of triggering and how I'm going to trigger it. So can I walk up into something and toe trigger a wind slab pillow? That's a big thing around here. We've got surface instabilities, and wind slabs might be small, but they might be super consequential. Or is it going to be something natural that triggers above us? And this is a good example of that. Like that's a monster cornice on Mount Currie, and it's just hanging above you the whole time. So you're just kind of hoping that that doesn't fall down. And then finally, what's the consequence in this terrain specifically? Again, we're not changing the terrain that we're in. And so if that cornice does break off or that wind slab does slide, what are the consequences here? And I think once we've actually kind of imagined those possibilities, thinking about those scenarios, and then be able to really rationalize or to explain your decision rationale is important in these places. Then being able to error correct. I think a lot of times we feel like we're really committed, and I think it's probably true that we're almost never completely committed. And we can be climbing up something and we can always turn back down, or almost always turn back down. This is probably one example where you are relatively committed once you make that rappel into the north face of Mount Currie. Probably be pretty challenging to climb back out, but maybe the first person could have a poke and come back. I've turned around a bunch of times in the ledge couloir in Squamish up above the gondola because you get up to the top and there's just a little roll, and that's a perfect spot to collect wind slab. So if we do find ourselves in that spot, we can always error correct, or almost always error correct. I think being able to use the rope is a really valuable one, and being confident with the ability to use the rope. It's not a get out of jail free card, but it allows us to solve a lot of problems, especially when we're talking about surface instabilities. And then finally, we talk a lot, or gets talked about speed being a tool and reducing exposure time. And that's totally true, if we're talking about walking under seracs or something like that, but not always. And we have to think about when speed is a tool and when it's not. So in that position where walking up into a wind slab pillow, it's really not that useful of a tool. How about this one? It's local. Somebody's got to know it. It's the Siberian Express on Atwell. Ultimately, managing avalanche risk really means different things in different terrain to me. And so being aware, again, this one is kind of my own personal thing, but being aware of both likelihood and consequence. I think we really look at likelihood pretty hard when we read the avalanche bulletin, and we maybe let consequence slip a little bit. So I think, maybe the old guys in the back are thinking that this is all pretty obvious, and they've come by that information a lot earlier, but this has kind of evolved for me. So that's all I've got. I'm happy to answer questions or chat afterwards or whatever, but thanks a lot for listening.
Any questions at all for Eric before he vacates the stage? Anyone? Great, Eric, thank you very much, and thank you, Arc'teryx.
Pleasure.
I'm going to now, oh, I guess I'm not doing anything. No, let's welcome to the stage. Is it Gabe and Jerome, or just one of you? Both. Just Gabe for now from Whistler Heli Skiing. Come on up here, and you're the next speaker.
Let's see if we can get this to play. We have a video here. I'm just going to see if clicking on it. Uh-oh. Let's see. It worked when we tried it earlier, so just bear with us.
Little helicopter rotors going around.
Okay, Whistler Heli Ski. Uh-oh. I just don't want this video to play again. Here we go. Is this the right one, fellas? Okay. So, my name's Gabe. I work at Whistler Heli Ski. I'm fairly new to the Sea to Sky Whistler Blackcomb scene, so I just wanted to introduce myself before all of that. You know, Whistler Heli Ski has been in the area for a long time, and there's a lot of really awesome people who work there. And just a quick plug for Whistler Heli Ski, if you do have a season pass, you do get 20% off. So think about it for, you know, that special day out with your friends, or if someone's in town. I don't want to bore you too much with that. Let's get straight into it. So, like I said, I'm Gabe Nolan, and I sat in the audience at one of these things about 10 years ago in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where the idea for State of the Snowpack sort of started. And so, you know, this is a really cool moment for me to do, you know, full circle, to be up here and, you know, just remembering back on my days of sitting in the audience. So let's get right into it. So we got a couple cool pics, because we all know how good the skiing's been. And these pics are from earlier in the season. And, you know, I just wanted to start with this snow water equivalent graph that I built. Big shout out to Whistler Blackcomb Patrol for helping me with this. This is last season's, oh. Sorry about that. Okay. You know, as guides, we use the computer, but we're sometimes afraid of it. So, okay, here we go. So this is a graph that I got from Tim Haggerty over at Whistler Mountain, and it's just showing the snow water equivalency and the cumulative snowfall. So I just wanted to do a quick comparison. You know, year to year, it always changes. And this season, you know, we started off with a bang, and, you know, these graphs, they look pretty to me, and I like the way they look. But you can see over here on January 10th, 11th, and 12th, I didn't add it in today, but obviously we've had a big change. And I just wanted to highlight, the beginning of the season. And so we can get right into it. Sorry, can you help me with the notes? Because they're not over here. We had the notes over here, but...
I think when you played the video, it flipped
Oh, okay.
to the web version.
Come on up here, David Jones.
Yeah, sorry about this, team.
Yeah, I think when you escape here. This is, yes, you're in the web version here.
So while we're dealing with the technical difficulties. Okay, there's these two cats. No, I'm not going to do that to you. Yeah, so it's interesting. I think so far what Gabe's getting at is the difference in the water and the snow. We all know there's a difference. Is there anybody in the room that's brand new to Whistler? This is your first season here? Yeah, so quite a few. That's awesome. Welcome. It's generally, we never know what we're going to get. We can have a really cold winter, and by cold out here, it could be -5, -10. For those of you from the Rockies, no, it can get colder than that, obviously. But we're pretty lucky, and then some years like this year, we get a bit of water in January.
Yes, some water, some warm temps. I thought this shirt was appropriate for today. But anyways, okay, so December 16th through Boxing Day, we received 1.7 meters of snow. And after Christmas, we sort of entered into a little bit of a lull. We did have some cold temps and minimal snowfall. And then the story starts to change a little bit. January 3rd to the 11th brought 2 meters of snow, which was redistributed by strong to extreme winds from the south and southwest. And during the New Year's cycle, we observed wind slabs, storm slabs, and even reports of some dry, loose snow throughout the sea to sky. And something I want to mention too before we get away from it, on January 2nd, we did bury a layer. It was a little suspect. We saw surface hoar, grapple, and there was a thin melt freeze crust on solar aspects. So that was all then buried. However, throughout the storms that we've seen, those layers remain somewhat inactive, and we were seeing a lot more of the avalanches going in the storm snow interface. And so I had some time off in this early New Year's storm. That's sort of what I'm calling it. And I found some amazing skiing down at Elfin Lakes, on the Duffy, and at the resort. Did everyone else find some good skiing? Like, that was pretty awesome, right? So then, going forward, on January 10th, we received around 100 centimeters of snow in 72 hours. So a huge event. And just another quick side note, I spent a night out in the woods down at the Elfin Lake shelter on the 5th, and I woke up that night to 70 centimeters of snow overnight. So I'm sort of speaking to the variability, right, that the mountain ranges around here see. West of Whistler to the north of Whistler, it's always going to be a little bit different. And, especially even down south, it seemed like that storm kind of got held up on the coast and had a hard time making its way up. But, 70 centimeters of snow down near the sea to sky gondola, it was sort of surprising to me. Okay, then on January 12th, we saw rain up to 2,000 meters. And in just a moment, I'm going to show you guys a picture, but I just wanted to highlight, you know, this was the good times, right? This was awesome. That was, you know, it's always a pleasure to wake up and see that. And then by today, we've calculated the numbers. It's not great, but yeah, 149 mils of rain. So it's a lot of water, and that's really what I'm starting to focus on. So here's just a quick little graphic. It's not super nuanced. It didn't want to make it like that, but just starting down low. This is the last time we did the state of the snowpack, right? And then the next day is when that storm started coming in. So we had a melt freeze crust that was buried. Then we got the 1.7 meters of snow. Then on January 2nd, this is where we had a little bit of a lull, and we observed surface hoar, grapple, and melt freeze crust. And those are the things that make us a little nervous. During the next storm cycle, we were really thinking about that. And in a moment, I'll get to it. So then 2 meters of snow fell on top of that. And then again, here we go. We've got the wet, the storm, and the wind slab on the 11th. And now today, the wet upper snowpack. And so we were out today in the field, and we did observe a very thin 1 centimeter melt freeze crust and a fair amount of wet snow underneath that. We did also find some dry snow, and I'm going to show you in just a second, which was a little surprising, but it was also sandwiched with some wet snow below that as well. Okay, so this is the Pig Alley temps, 96-hour temps. And so we're walking along, and it's all good, and then, boom, right here on the 11th around noon. Were people on the mountain, does anyone remember it clearly being warm and the snow starting to get wet? Yeah, so this massive spike right here has continued. And, you know, it's affecting the snowpack. We're seeing a lot of compression. And so going forward, and then here's peak. So it's not as bad, right? Here's the 0 line right here. And so it's coming along, but boom, right here on the 12th. So yesterday at 4 p.m., it is starting to go positive. And that is not what we want to see, but we're going to deal with it, right? Okay. So this is a pit that I dug today on the Trory Glacier. It's just from a few hours ago. And what we see here is a very solid snowpack. Down low, you can see there's a bit of a softer layer towards the bottom, and that was quite wet. However, we did find dry snow, and I just want to point out a couple things here. So have people seen these before? This is a graph of a snow pit that I dug. Has anyone, or people unfamiliar? It's okay if you haven't seen something like this. Okay. So you can see the melt freeze crust is up here. So that was created in just the last 12 hours, and then some really stiff snow down here. So here's the hand hardness scale. And so, yeah, pencil plus, 1 finger, and again, 1 finger plus. So altogether, I mean, this is not representing the entire area. Again, this is just one piece of data taken from the Trory Glacier. There was over 300 centimeters of snow in general, and this is just a 1 meter snowpack. But you can see down low, we did find quite wet snow down here. And this was also sort of interesting. We were finding some old precip particles that had not decomposed yet. And then up here again, there's the melt freeze crust. Okay. So here's some pictures of my colleagues and I. Is there anything that stands out right away in this picture? Yeah. So that was sort of the name of the game today. We saw a fair amount of rain runnels. We did find some soft snow. It lacked a lot of structure. And in this picture right here, you know, we're trying to cut a CT compression test right here, but it was very difficult to just get the saw to go through. It was very sticky, very wet, so we've got 2 people working on it there. And again, this is on the Troy Glacier. Does anyone know where this is? Yeah, someone said it, Decker. So we saw a fair amount of avalanches today. We did get out and fly. It was the first time in several days. We did see a lot of size 1 to 2 avalanches and a few size 3s. We also noted that many of them ran a long distance, as you guys can see. But the depth, we estimated it to be 20 to 40 centimeters, the size of the crown. So that was really surprising. We were expecting total carnage. We were thinking a lot of these were going to run to the ground. We did not see a ton of dirt and rock. So that was interesting. The largest avalanches did pull up at the very, very bottom, like I mentioned, like right in here, but nothing in here. So we were suspecting, especially right here, that a lot of those wind slabs that we saw develop in the past 72 hours, they have become wet slabs and wet loose. They've just been so saturated. So that was the main thing that we were seeing. Here's a nice little picture of the team. You know, we've had a lot of down days recently, so for us to get out and fly, it was quite nice. We ended up landing on Blackcomb today because it's just been really tricky with the flying conditions. So we needed a little stoke. We needed to take a picture and feel like we were doing something. Okay, so this stuff is all just pulled from Avalanche Canada. Does everyone know where to find this stuff? Like, is this new to anybody? You know, Avalanche Canada is a really great resource. If you haven't, you should check it out for sure. It's sort of the gold standard of avalanche information. It's user-friendly. And so something I wanted to point out here with Avalanche Canada's forecast, this is what I took in the morning. So Tuesday, 433, and then Wednesday, 322. And by this afternoon, they had changed how they were feeling. And I agree with that, mostly because of the depth of the avalanches we were looking at today. Again, we were expecting to see massive crowns up to 1 meter, and we just did not see that. Okay, so this is definitely on my mind. There's been a ton of wind, a lot of snow. We know that there are a lot of cornices in the area. So Avalanche Canada's #1 problem as of today is cornice. And so we know that below a lot of cornices, wind slabs also form. So when you mix in a failing cornice falling onto a large slab, especially a wind slab, you are setting up for a very large destructive avalanche. Do people agree with that? Like, are people feeling like cornices are still out there? Yes. Right? And we know that they're potentially very fragile with all the water, so this is definitely on our mind. And if you look at the compass right here, it's, west, north, east, and touching southeast with the chances being likely. Yeah, this is definitely on our minds, and we were under a couple cornices today, and we were definitely a little suspect. And again, we were surprised at the lack of destruction in a lot of places. Okay, Avalanche Canada's problem #2 is wet loose. They're saying it's at all elevations, which I agree, in all aspects. And they've kind of come back on their chances. They've dropped towards unlikely to possible. And the size is small, 1 to 2, potentially large. So sort of what the message Avalanche Canada is trying and, conveying is, traveling in the Alpine is definitely not recommended. And I agree with that. If you do decide to go, you should be asking yourself why and where. I think we've had so much good snow in the last 2-3 weeks. Everyone's pumped up to get out there, but this is a good chance to maybe look at your decisions. And I just feel like the snowpack right now, it's a little tricky, and we've got some warm weather coming up. So, if you are going out there, use extreme caution around the cornices. They're large, fragile, and they can trigger slabs on the slopes below. So I'm on board with that. Okay, again, Avalanche Canada's snowpack summary. So significant rain and warming event has saturated the upper snowpack to ridgetop. As you've already heard me say, we've had an insane amount of rain for January, and there's now a surface crust with moist and dry snow below. So it's just strange, honestly, at this point. The mid-December crust is 100 to 200 centimeters deep, reaches up to 2,200 meters. It's well bonded to the snow above, and above 2,200 meters, a layer of facets and crust from November is at the base of the snowpack. And again, just with the depth of the avalanches that we saw today, we're sort of putting this layer, the December 16th layer, kind of out of our minds. We think it's pretty well bonded and squashed. Okay, so here's some upcoming weather. I'm not going to get too much into that because we have someone who's much better at the weather after me. So I don't want to get too much into this, but it does look like we've got some nice sunny weather coming around the corner. So, it's been pouring rain in Squamish where I live, so it's kind of nice to have some sun on the forecast. Okay, confidence. So you're telling me there's a chance. The confidence is moderate, right? Uncertainty is due to how the snowpack will react to the forecasted weather. We still need more data, right? We've had a lot of down days. We need more evidence. We need to get more bodies on the ground, really. Skis on the ground. So I agree with the moderate confidence from Avalanche Canada. There's more to be discovered. Okay, notable avalanche events. And I'm not going to go too much into this, mostly because today, when we flew, we saw lots of small 1-2s, a couple 3s, but it's a widespread avalanche cycle, right? It's happening everywhere. I can only imagine what it's like up to the north and to the west. We were primarily in the spearhead today. So yeah, a couple skier accidentals earlier. Avalanche Canada has a fantastic resource on their website under the MINS report. That was my reaction today when we were flying, for a couple reasons. But yeah, that was me. Let's see. Oh. I don't know if that's not mine. I actually did not add this photo. Did someone that? I don't know where this came from. Yeah. Okay, that's what it is. Yeah, does anyone have any more information about avalanches to share? Like, does anyone want to talk about something they experienced in the last couple days? It's okay if you don't want to. No pressure, okay. So this is what I just touched on, filing a MIN report. At the resort? I decided not to talk about that for a couple reasons. Can you repeat that? He's asking. You're just asking, yeah, there you are. Can you say that again? Okay, yeah, so you experienced it, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was during the main storm cycle, it was fairly easy to encounter stuff like that, especially if you're in steep terrain. Yeah, a lot of wind. Have people in here used the MIN report? Have people done one before? Couple. Yep, there you go, sweet. Yeah, I mean, this is an awesome tool for people who are recreating in the mountains. If you don't have access to professional software, this is a really great place to find other people's experiences, you know, especially if you're heading in a to a different range. You can use the region tab to select, you know, South Coast or North Coast or you know, Monashee, stuff like that. So it's a very cool tab. Okay, so here are the takeaways that I wanted to share with you guys. You know, significant rain on the snowpack is a major red flag. Rain can destroy well-bonded layers, weaken existing structures. It adds additional load and stress, which can lead to very large and destructive avalanches. You know, the wind slabs have become wet slabs. Large destructive wet slabs and wet loose avalanches are still possible, right? We know it's only going to get warmer in the coming days. So I'm curious to see if the buried January 2nd surface hoar grapple and the melt freeze crust that has several meters of snow on it will be reactivated. Again, I was just in the Spearhead today, so need to spend more time in the field to gather more data. You know, it's not going to be freezing overnight. I think that's a red flag for everybody. When we can enter into the freeze overnight in the sun in the day, we can get more stability, but it does not look like it's going to go that way for a day or so. So staying away from the large overhead hazards is still super important, and expecting these avalanches to potentially run further. There's a lot of energy involved in wet, loose, wet slab, and when cornices are failing. So this is a good time to practice your rescue skills, prepare for the next storm. You know, take it easy, maybe go to that yoga class you've been putting off if you've been skiing super hard. This will be us for the next little bit. We're just going to be watching the weather, seeing what's in the pipe. But have fun, be safe, obviously. And okay, so that's it for me. Jerome, do you want to come talk about mindset?
Thank you, Gabe. Awesome. Thank you, Gabe. I'll only be 5 minutes or so. I wasn't part of the crew. I was on a day off today. I took the snowboard and went slush surfing on Whistler today, as opposed to going in the mountains with those guys, but glad you got some information for us. This is something that Eric kind of touched on in his presentation, mindset. I just want to talk a little bit about mindset. I might need to figure out how to go to the next slide, but not yet. It's something that as professionals we consider on a daily basis. I put a bunch of wordy things there, but basically how to manage managing complex decision making in the mountains. So after we do our morning meeting, weather forecast, and we have make an avalanche forecast, and we have a plan for the day, and we know what groups are doing that. We set a mindset, and this mindset over the last months has changed quite a bit. When Nicole and Steve did the presentation a month ago in December, we were in assessment mindset, a lot of us. We were going out into the mountain and assessing, so then we travel safely. We kind of trying to gather information, and it's a very important thing when we set that mindset, because it kind of holds us in line to decisions we make throughout the day, especially when lots of things are coming up at us. So the operational mindset is a practice that is something that I learned during operation, but I take it back to ski touring now sometimes, and when I look at the forecast, often my decisions when I was ski touring were mostly about an objective, what I wanted to achieve that day. And the mindset was dependent on the people I was with and we were going. Not so much about what the Avalanche Bulletin described. So what Gabe this showed for Avalanche Canada showed us today, that's a big piece that should affect our mindset that day. So yeah, human factors, biases are obviously things that we're thinking about right now. You know, we're stoked. We've been going out skiing and we want to get after it more. So that's the mindset. And as we move through the season, we have to adjust that sometimes. This last month, we've been jumping around quite a bit. After that initial first few weeks in December, the mindset was continuous, a bit in assessment. We had a lot of storm up high. And yeah, I'm going to the next slide here. Is that the big button? The big button. I'm back one. Was I already there? I guess. I don't know. Did I hit it twice? So in early December, we had rain down low and we had storms. So as guides, we couldn't go many places. So this assessment mindset stuck with us until about the middle of the month when we had that warm event at December 16th. And then after that, the mindset started changing. We had a few windows to get out there. And that's when we start potentially stepping out. So the mindset after we see that the conditions are letting us get into the terrain a little bit more. So what we do after the morning meeting, we open runs. We decide where we're going to go skiing. So we'll, if we step out, we can add more runs to our choices for the day. We were also then since December dabbling back and forth over into Christmas into the status quo. So the next day, nothing changes. The forecast stays the same. We're going to keep it status quo. And then when we have new snow or a bunch of new snow arrives and wind, we had some extreme winds, we often had to then also step back. So these are an operational plans that we set out. So when you read your forecast in the morning and you make a decision with your group and you have an idea to go somewhere, think about what Avalanche Canada said. And it's a good idea to adjust your mindset. Oh, well, actually, those hazards, those winds are increasing. Maybe the plan today is not such a good idea. We're going to find in those couloirs or those convex rolls a little bit more of a wind slab. And maybe we'll just, as a group, decide to step back and adjust our day's plan. So it's a big piece of the professional world to kind of, after we do all of those observations in the morning and decision and forecast, to set this mindset and decide where we're going to go. Yeah. This kind of wraps it up a little bit, that decision-making point that I wanted to talk about. We've rolled from assessment in the last few weeks to be able to step out, step back, status quo. Then we had, in New Year's, when Gabe described we had some good weather, we actually went to a 1-1-1. So all of a sudden we're like really stepping out. And now we're stepping back. Big time. So let that guide you, that forecast, and look at what is described and then make a decision in that regard. The mindset's very important set. It really manages a group really well. If somebody's not feeling comfortable with something, listen to that person as well. So play with that idea of the mindset on. I'm going to leave it at that because I think we've been going for a long time. I do want to talk about the ISSW that is coming up this September. It's a International Snow and Science workshop. It's a global gathering, and it's going to be taking place here in Whistler this year. Actually, State of the Snowpack crew is going to be there. They're actually going to be, looking to do a presentation there, so we'll probably see them there. That's going to be nice to see those guys out there. And on the September 30th, we're going to offer a public day. So for all of you guys that are not professionals, you'll have an opportunity to come and see the professional work that day. So you'll be able to walk around the posters, and all the Avalanche work that's being done globally, internationally, is represented there. So it's going to be a neat little thing to look at. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm going to hand it back to Richard. We're going to go into the intermission.
All right. Thanks, Jerome. Do we have any questions for Jerome or Gabe from Whistler Heli Ski before we move on to the intermission? Yes, at the back, white hat. I love a white hat. Sure. Yeah, so the question for Jerome is, we're looking at, with the warm temperatures and so much moisture, what are we seeing that really represents the typical spring snowpack, and what are things that are different from that? Did I get that? Yeah.
I think you're right. Sorry, Richard. It's looking like a spring snowpack right now. It's a well-settled snowpack due to the rain and the warm. There are hazards, and with the next, and Gabe touched on it, the next few days with the warm, everything that's sun exposed are probably the highest risk areas.
Anything else? Yeah, so the question was talking about the solar effect. Obviously, we don't have a lot of sunlight, and the sun is a little bit lower in the sky right now. In the spring, we have a lot more solar effect. The sun is higher in the sky. How does that affect it?
I think Gabe wants to take this one.
Yeah, I will just add to that yeah, the sun is not as high right now, so it doesn't pack as big of a punch. So that's something that we're definitely thinking about, and something to just add to that too is, without the freezing temps at night, that is something we do typically see in the spring. We'll enter into more of a diurnal cycle, and right now we're not going to see freezing temps overnight. So when you have the cool cloudless kind of nights, we do see the radiation exchange leaving the snowpack, and I think only time will tell this week if we are seeing a big exchange with that radiation that's stored in the snowpack. But I mean, it's shaping up to look like a spring snowpack right now, but that's the big thing for me, that it's not freezing overnight right now. That's more of like a summer thing.
Yeah, but with the warm temps and the sun on that's like the southern aspects, I would be careful right now, because it does on a daily basis, the warm temps plus the sun on it. Yeah, it could penetrate a little bit further, and near rocks, things pop out and loosen things up. So especially dancing around it, on it, is probably not a good idea.
I love how you're talking about the coming sunshine after all this rain that's just been bringing us the doom. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, gentlemen, thank you to Whistler Heli Ski. Thank you so much, Jerome and Gabe. Let's take a short break, please. This is our last opportunity to buy tickets for the raffle. We have great prizes tonight. The Polaris snowmobile, get your tickets for that. That's worth, I think a little over 21 grand. So that's good value there. Go find yourself a beverage, and we'll be back here in 10 minutes. All right, everybody, if we can start moseying back towards our seats, please. We can please start moseying back towards our seats.
You're good?
So a couple of things. I just remember the raffle for the Polaris snowmobiles at the end of the season. However, all of the other raffles will take place as soon as we're done, as soon as David is done with his little talk. So please make yourselves comfortable and you want to stay because they're great raffle prizes, and we will be doing the raffle right here at the end. Again, I just want to do a shout out to this great space at Evo. It's an excellent community space. Let's put it up for them. Come on. Yeah, let's put our hands together for Evo. There's a couple of questions. Again, I want to thank all of our sponsors. It's so important to be able to provide this to all of you for free. But if you didn't show up here, there's no point having it. So big shout out to all of you for taking the time to come out this evening. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I'd like to now introduce the powder picker himself, David Jones. I can't tell you how great he is, better than he can tell you. So, David, come on over here and let's get moving.
Hey, everyone. I absolutely had to do that. Thank you for coming tonight. Great to see everyone here. And I listened to Eric's presentation and thought, oh my goodness, am I in over my head here? That's some serious hardcore stuff. What is this audience like? I've brought some really simple weather stuff. So I was taught early on that the most important issue around speaking to a group was knowing the audience, and I don't really feel like I know you, but I've been reassured there's enough newbies here that the content I'm about to show you hopefully will still be useful to you. And we'll get to the questions at the end, but I'd prefer if you interrupted me at any time and just put your hand up, and I will try and charge to you if you have a question, so you can ask the question for the benefit of the folks online. That may or may not work, but we'll give it a whirl. If you have some questions, it would be super helpful if you'd kind of sneak up to the front so I don't have to sprint to the back when it comes time for those questions. So keep that in mind. Anytime you got a question, creep to the front, stick your hand up, and I'll try and hand you the mic. Okay, so I couldn't do anything here without starting with a quick look at the weather forecast. This is very brief. I only have 2 slides. I think we know the weather story right now, and that is big ridge of high pressure after a Pineapple Express. Yes, it's a Pineapple Express. I still call them that. They're also known, technically speaking, as atmospheric rivers. It's the same thing, more or less, except when I say pineapple, that means impact and that means punch. Your atmospheric river doesn't necessarily have a punch to it. They're a technical description of a particular type of flow and the moisture that's embedded from the subtropics, and we get them all the time. So I prefer the term Pineapple Express or tropical punch. Those were big storms. Those were huge storms. This was, I would say, a moderate, let's call it a moderate Pineapple Express that went through here. I don't know all the numbers for the precipitation, but you saw from Gabe's presentation 150 millimeters. I've heard reports from Eric, the first speaker, of 220 at the Sea to Sky gondola. I looked myself through the Environment Canada stuff that I can find online, and it looked like over 100 millimeters right here at Nestor's, and in the Callahan about 100, 105, 110, something like that. So that's a big storm to come on the heels of a major snowfall. And I think the main part of the weather is the ridge is settled in here now, and you've all heard the bad news. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but here's a look at the long range, and I don't expect anyone here to understand exactly what you're looking at here. But what you can see on each of these 6 maps, these are 6 different models. 3 of them are basically have the same mother, so there's really 6 models here. But these are 8 different shown. And you can see that there's a big load of blue and purple colors that represent the cold side in weather. And the map's hard to make out, but that's right over the continent, the center of the continent, America, United States, and Canada. And on the west coast, where you see the warm colors, that's us. And this forecast is for not right now, not tomorrow, it's from 6 days from now. Okay, so people often ask me how predictable is the weather, and I say, well, that depends on the weather, because it does. Okay, there's always a level of uncertainty in the weather forecast, and that's what varies. It's the level of uncertainty in the forecast, which is a consequence of the pattern. And in this case, I can guarantee you there will be a ridge, because all 8 or 6 of these models are saying 6 days from now, there's going to be a ridge. So there you go. When someone asks you the question, how predictable is the weather? Well, what do you mean by predictable, and what do you mean by weather is the rational, appropriate response. In this case, the ridge is what I'm talking about. It's going to be here 6 days from now. And after a Pineapple Express, it turns out that some of the forecasters in my history, that is the old timers that were really top-notch forecasters, noticed a pattern of this in the wintertime. When we have a Pineapple Express or a very warm ridge move in, afterwards it's often followed by an Arctic outbreak, which is a double whammy for powder, because with the Pineapple Express we have the snow ruined. In a sense, and now we've got to wait out the drought, and the drought will be replaced by a cold drought. That is an Arctic outbreak, where the Arctic air comes out and dries us out again. So it might be a while till we see some fresh snow. And this is the second look ahead. I don't really go beyond 6 days in the weather. Some of my colleagues do and some don't. You notice Mark Madriga never goes beyond 5 days unless he's forced to. We don't like to do that because you can't really tell whether you're adding value. Things are so variable. There's so much waving in the atmospheric patterns. It's hard to appreciate that you've added some value. But this is 10 days, and I would call this worthless speculation. But on the back of what the forecasters have noted, that is this tendency to often have a cold outbreak after a warm ridge of high pressure. 2 of these models, these 2 down here, are pointing at, you can almost see how the cold air, the blues, have shifted to the left, and to you guys, you can't see the map, but that's over us. So that's 10 days from now, potential for an Arctic outbreak, which could mean a prolonged drought in terms of snowfall for us. When the Arctic air comes out of the valleys and inlets, it often comes with just a puff of very low density snow. And unfortunately, it never comes in huge waves of low density snow. It just picks up the remaining moisture that's left around, or brings a little bit with it. And we get a puff, I call it, of snow as the Arctic front comes out. That puff can have huge consequences. If you're driving in the Fraser Valley, you will notice at Sumas Prairie, whenever the Arctic front comes out, cars are off the road continuously in that stretch in the Fraser Valley on Highway 1, just from the little bit of blinding and blowing snow that develops. The snow is so light, it just gets transported by the wind, and it's hugely consequential. What happens later is the Arctic air can stick around from anywhere for a few days up to as long as 10 days, 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks. And it's usually the case that at the end of the Arctic outbreak, we see some moisture come in, and that can be a huge snowstorm. That's the one you want to look forward to. So I have no way of telling whether this Arctic outbreak is going to happen, and as a forecaster, I'm just looking at that and taking note. Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. But day 6, guaranteed, the ridge will be here. That's what I know. We got a question? We'll try this.
Is that pretty similar to what happened last year at this time, pretty much? Didn't we have like precisely that happen? Maybe like next week last year?
Yeah, that does sound familiar to me. To answer those questions, I usually ask Mark Madriga. My memory of weather is not great, but I do remember last winter, okay? And if you recall, it was a terrible start to the season. And then at the beginning of January, the cold air came in. And a couple of days after the cold air arrived, we had the season-saving storm, if you remember that, because it looked like we were in trouble and it was starting to get into the late months or the late weeks of December and early January, turn things around in a hurry. And so this is a pattern that does happen on occasion. Right. Okay, so you've all seen this before. All right. So I called this, just to entertain you, for the sake of entertainment, Black Boxes, Big Willy, and other resources. So I'm just going to show 3 separate resources. One you may have seen before, one I'm pretty sure you've never seen before, and the other is a resource in development. I just want to ask you guys a few questions, just a show of hands. How many of you are familiar with Spot Weather Site? How many of you use it regularly? Okay. What about Ruping Mo's experimental model site with a 1 kilometer resolution model running for this part of the world? No one? Oh, okay. That's a smart ass in the crowd. All right, so I do have something to show you that should be interesting to even the more experienced, because I'm going to presume folks that are really into skiing and doing things like Eric was outlining there have spent a fair amount of time looking at the weather. So our most common use of the expression black box surrounds aviation disasters where the black box, which is an orange box, is searched for in the aftermath of some sort of tragedy, because the black box is the flight data recorder and it is a clue to what foresaw the disaster. The inputs here are recorded and the output was a disaster, so this becomes very important. So as a concept, the black box is a device, a system, or a process that can be understood and analyzed solely on the basis of the inputs and outputs. And as you know, this, or you may not know, just in case you don't know, this is without any knowledge of the system's internal mechanisms or workings. So black boxes are common. We use them all the time as forecasters. They are called models. And you put inputs into them and they spit out an answer, and often you don't really know why that answer is coming out. And so to meteorologists now, even us, weather is becoming increasingly black boxy, just like the rest of your life. You sit down at a computer terminal, ask some questions, answers get spat back to you, and you really have no idea about the credibility of the answers unless you keep probing and asking and prompting and telling the computer or the AI agent that you're wrong. So it's becoming this way for us, and there's just no turning back at this point. A lot of us are really struggling with this proliferation of artificial intelligence models that are coming in and doing the weather completely absent the physical equations of the atmosphere, and doing a pretty good job of it, apparently. In fact, in some cases, doing a better job from what I've read and heard. So models themselves are boxy. They divide the atmosphere into boxes, or more commonly referred to as grid cells, and this is just an indication of that. The grid cells are three-dimensional, but we usually refer to them in the sense of just 2 dimensions. That is, their horizontal resolution as opposed to the vertical, which is divided up into different pressure levels. So the resolution of a model is a key concept that everyone should understand if you're looking at the output from something like spot weather. okay, for sure, because you're presented with a super chill, sexy, seductive answer, and you need to know a little bit more about that, and this is the most important thing to know when you're interrogating a site like Spot Weather. Garth, the producer of that website, the creator of the website, has tried to show this on the front page when you dial in. You punch in your spot, which for me is usually Blackcomb Peak. There's a reason for that. And his depiction here shows different size boxes, and they are stacked on top of each other. He's trying to show you here that the model grid points are different and how they are mapped from your location, or your location is mapped to the model grid points. So that's what this picture at the beginning on the front page of Spot Weather is. This resolution issue is super important. This is a global scale grid that models use, and so in this case, global scale could be anything from 15 to 33 kilometers. And at the intersections of all of these lines, of course, the trapezoids, the boxes, the rectangles are formed there, but all of the calculations are done at the intersections of these lines. And if you can imagine a model that covers the whole globe, that's a lot of calculations. And 15 to 33 kilometers, at 33 kilometers resolution, any physical process that is smaller than 33 kilometers in the horizontal can be completely missed. So thunderstorms, for example. If you want to increase the resolution to pick up things like some thunderstorms, you have to make a trade-off, and that is to run your model over a smaller domain or map size. So this is an example right here of the Canadian regional model. You guys, again, probably can't see it, but it's covering Canada, the United States, and Greenland. And very shortly, this will only be covering Canada and the United States. So if you want to, some believe, if you want to knock it down even further, you can go to a high-resolution, super small grid, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate here in just a second. So here's the operational grid of what is a high-resolution model. It's cramped right down to BC, and that's because when the grid points are only 2.5 kilometers apart, they can pick up things like thunderstorms, but your computational expense is growing as the grid gets finer and finer, so you make the domain smaller and smaller. One thing, it's super important to understand that the terrain resolution, because the terrain, the Earth is in these models too, the Earth's surface, and it has to be modeled at the same resolution as the atmosphere. So the terrain resolution equals the model resolution, and the model resolution doesn't often match the real terrain. In fact, I'd go as far as saying it never matches the real terrain. So here is a finely contoured map of the Spearhead and all the glaciers to the west of Whistler, which is right there. And that's Blackcomb Peak, which we know is 2,436 meters in actual elevation. However, when you look at the model, the global, Canadian global model, this is what the terrain actually looks like inside the model. You can see the contour lines here, and that one is about 1,500 meters. So you're 1,000 meters out in elevation. So when you look at this automated information spat out on places and websites like Spot Weather, you got 1,000 meters difference. That's going to make a huge difference in the temperature and precipitation type and all the rest. So keep that in mind. When the resolution gets a bit fancier, a little higher at 2.5K, the actual height of Blackcomb Peak is 1,933 meters. And if I went even further to a 1 kilometer grid, then Blackcomb Peak is 2,106 meters high. It's still 300 meters lower than the actual. So you need to know that. The most important thing is understanding the model terrain compared to the real terrain. This is another way to look at it in terms of pixels. So this is a 33 kilometer global scale model grid drawn as pixels. And that's Vancouver Island. And this is the Coast Range. Nice definition. That's the Strait of Georgia right there, highlighted in darker blues. So that's actually what the model sees. This is pretty important for sailors who along the coast of BC and around Vancouver Island are looking at models and sometimes not understanding that there's only 2 grid points. And as much as they think that forecast is doing great, the forecast has nothing to do with matching reality because the grid is so coarse that it can't possibly. So in this particular version, there's about 2 pixels between, say, Horseshoe Bay and Squamish. That's it. That's the resolution. If you drop it down to 10K, you can see, and I'm not going to highlight it because it darkens out the rest of the screen, only makes it harder for you to see. But you can see the Coast Range starting to show up a little bit better here at 10K. Vancouver Island, a little more definition, but it's still pretty blocky. It's not until you get down to about 2.5 kilometers resolution that now the model terrain is starting to look like the real terrain, okay? And if you go even further down to super high resolution at 1K, this is what the area looks like on the south coast. So you're starting to see fine patterns, the dendritic patterns of the valleys of the Coast Mountains and Vancouver Island. So when I began as a forecaster, the resolution of these models, well, let's say a little bit before I began, was about 200 kilometers. I remember in university doing program work, and there was grid spacing of 200 kilometers. And in that case, the Coast Range and every range between the Coast Range and the Rockies looked like this in the model. So if you interrogate that model in the middle, you're getting something that doesn't match reality in any way, shape, or form. So the closer you get to reality, the finer the grid spacing, the higher the resolution. And this was going to be the holy grail of meteorology because all of us grew up over the last 40 years in weather thinking all we have to do is get higher resolution models. Then we'll be able to incorporate the orographic, the topographic effects of weather on temperature and precipitation. But it turned out it didn't work so smoothly. The finer and finer we got, you need better and better microphysics, and that wasn't taken into account when we were looking ahead into the future. So this panacea of solving all the problems might be replaced by the panacea of machine learning and artificial intelligence now, okay? So just be mindful of model resolutions. Note the elevation difference between the real elevation and the model elevation before you go investing any of your, any of your recreational time in a forecast that's coming out of spot weather or the like. So fortunately, spot weather does identify the model elevation on every graph it produces. It's up at the top and it's right there. There's the model elevation for the Global Deterministic Prediction System forecast for Blackcomb Peak, and it's 1,503 meters, okay? One other sea to sky resource, which I'm pretty sure none of you heard, comes from the Mountain and Marine Meteorology Lab. No one's heard of that, I don't think, in here. There's 2 people in it at Environment Canada. And this is the output that a fellow by the name of Ruping Mo has kindly provided for all of us. And Ruping did me a favor a while back and actually created a map domain that would show the inflow and outflow on Howe Sound, which was very grand of him. And the output here is of 3 experimental models. The first being, you guys can barely see that on the screen, it's HRDPS 1 kilometer model. And in addition to that, that's really a baby of the HRDPS 2.5 kilometer model. All you need to remember is the resolution here, 1.5 and 2.5. The 1 is spun off the 2.5, okay? And also, this is a bonus. This is another experimental model from Environment Canada that goes out only 84 hours because it's higher resolution than the other version of the global. And it's a 10 kilometer resolution version of our global model, which is 15K operationally. So these are all experimental. It's got the government stamp there. This is an experimental product. Use at your own risk. Boy, the risk in weather is a lot less than the risk for a guy like Eric having to create a forecast. If he's wrong in his prediction, I'm just glad I'm not in that game because I couldn't handle that, that's for sure. This is the variables that are available to view on this, and this is a handy thing if you're trying to picture how the weather works, because you really get a sense of flow patterns when you start to look at the wind on this. It's such high resolution. So the grid is run on this domain, that stripe of British Columbia and Alberta. And the variables are winds, gusts, temperature, something called MaxR, 6-hour QPF, which is quantitative precipitation forecast, and 24-hour precipitation forecast. The first three are for the surface. And are there any sailors in here? Okay, now you guys might be quite interested. Hello, sailor. You guys might be quite interested in this. The controls for the animations are just your regular VCR controls that you can see right there. But the best part of it is that you can choose a South Coast domain map that zooms in on this area and the Strait of Georgia and Howe Sound as well. So here's what the domain for Howe Sound looks like and the South Coast. Pemberton, Whistler, right up there in the middle of that circle, and you can see when you choose winds on this for you sailors, these are at the surface, there's an animation you can produce, and it's quite easy to get a sense of where the strongest winds are. The arrows, the size, depicts the strength of the flow, and the colors also depict the strength of the flow. So this is a good resource that you can take a look at as sailors, but for us, we're more interested in things like 24-hour QPF, which stands for quantitative precipitation forecast. As I said, this is what the language of the forecasters. And this is something I grabbed on Saturday, and it's showing Whistler up in here, and the corresponding colors to the 24-hour precipitation amount are on the right-hand side there. And I can tell you that Whistler is right on the edge of 40 to 50 millimeters of rain in a 24-hour period from Saturday morning through Sunday morning. And the next slide is the next 24 hours. And you can see where the problem lay on the weekend. Okay, so Whistler's back into the yellow, that's 40 to 50. And as I said, in the valley, there was about 100. So this turned out to be a very high resolution and accurate forecast for this particular event. Also note that on Vancouver Island, some of these places like Kennedy Lake, which is right in there, the rainiest place on the coast, and the rainiest place in Canada is right above Tofino, just to the south. You can see the amounts forecast. I mean, that's what's amazing about these things. You're into the 200 to 250 millimeters of rain. So if you want to get a good picture of a storm, at least the modeled storm, the black box storm, sometimes the models are useful. You've probably heard the expression, models are always wrong. Sometimes they're useful. Weather models are exactly that. They're very useful, and they're often wrong, too. You can also grab a selection of point forecasts by choosing from any of the public forecast regions here. You can do that on Spot Weather, too. Okay. I'm going to pause right there. That was kind of a race through all of that. Has anyone got any questions about that particular resource? What's the good question? Damn, I knew I was supposed to add that. I'll get that to you. Okay. Any other questions that I can answer?
Last call, Zephos.
Last call, Zephos. Okay. All right. So this is resources in development. How many of you have heard of the term Big Willy? Okay. So a few have here. All right. For a long time, I've been trying to do this weather thing for skiers and for avalanche professionals in particular. And part of the game of having fun on the videos and trying to teach people a little bit about the local weather was to actually develop something that would cut the workload for avalanche professionals. I did a lot of work with Avalanche Canada at the end of my career. It was a super cool group to work with, very educated, very outdoors. and very laid back and down to earth, and I really enjoyed it. And after I quit the weather service, retired from the weather service, I had a dream of building an app. And I'd taken a couple of runs at it, and one day I was on the Harmony chair in a windstorm, and I got talking, as I do often, to people on the chairlift about the weather, and one of the fellows said, "Hey, you should talk to my friend, the guy on the left here." And the guy on the left here turned out to have a PhD in theoretical physics, and he's the first person I've ever talked to about the weather on a gondola or a chairlift here at Whistler that knew exactly what I was talking about. So he was intrigued by solving this problem of weather, and his background turned out to be in high-frequency trading. So he was a statistical genius, and somehow or other I roped him into giving me a hand with this, and we decided eventually, after last year's success, to form a company and try and take this thing into the future. So that guy turned out to be Big Willy on the left there. I used the Jesus avatar or icon for him because last year when we were forecasting precipitation for Whistler, it was unbelievable how well his statistical tricks did with 17 different models. And so he became Jesus Big Willy to me. Now, lots of really successful and interesting and talented people in this community, as you know. And there is another fella here that I went to knowing that he had some connections with Microsoft, looking for someone who could become an app engineer or build an app for us. And rather than send me to someone else, he just said, "Dave, I'll help you." To my great surprise. So suddenly, after 10 years of making a go at this, I had two super competent people to help me try and do this. And we've been trying to do this for a year solid now. And it turns out, I think it's turned out to be a lot harder than any of us thought. All of us thought it was going to be easier than this for different reasons. But we are trying to build a mobile-friendly application that will give you simple, sweet answers in a real, clear, straightforward way. So basically, we are now trying to build the best black box. So you can just look at this site and get the answers that you need. And we were pretty encouraged by what happened last year.
What geographical region?
Well, I mean, ultimately, you want to build this so that it can cover the globe, because as you saw, there are global scale models, but really the goal at first is to create a prototype for Whistler and the sea to sky corridor. So if we can get to that, I'll be happy, and then we can take it further than that. So Big Willy, the dude, and the powder picker teamed up, and the dude has been there and done that in the tech industry, and he's quite a character. Has a mistress named Claudia. And Claudia actually does all the work. And the dude takes all the accolades for all the work that Claudia is doing to build this app. So our goal here is to leverage multiple models so that you don't have to. There's so many models out there now that all of us are getting bored and just exhausted by trying to figure out which one to look at. And so Big Willy is here to try and sort out statistically the best answer for all of us, so we don't have to do that painstaking work. So this is just a list of 43 different models that we have access to through an API, and we're trying to generate the best answer for the mountains around here in our web-friendly application. So these are some snapshots. I was hoping to demonstrate it live, but as these things go, stuff takes longer than you think. So I just took some snapshots. This is the interface. We're trying to make it really simple. And I'm going to zoom in on the top half of it because you'll be able to actually see that. And it's straightforward. There's your choices. Whistler, 1,650 meters. That's the elevation of Pig Alley. You select your date range, and then you choose your variables. And it's quite straightforward. There's not too many fancy ways to communicate weather information other than graphs, but at some point we're really going to need your help to help us present this in a way that you guys can understand quickly. I'm a big fan of glance value. So there's going to be a couple of interfaces here, one for pros and one for people who are satisfied with the glance value. Okay. The graphs look like this. This is actual output from January 11th. And this is the temperature forecast for 10 days. And you can see that that peak right there is right over January the 16th. So we're at January the 13th, and, you know, we're into the warm air for a while here. The outflow is going to kick in on Thursday morning. That'll help to dry us out, this low cloud and crap that's hanging around and we can't get rid of. But this is indicating that quite clearly here, that the warming is going to go on till at least January 20th. The warming, the above freezing temperatures at Pig Alley. Here's a graph showing the rain, snow, and total precipitation, and you get the idea here that starting as snow, this is a 3-day version of it, and you're going to see it starts as snow and changes over to rain. The lines are the cumulative amounts of rain and snow. So this is the real trick for me. How do we get this into some format that you guys can just quickly glance at, get your information, and go on? There's a lot of websites out there that I look at and I'm confused immediately, even as a forecaster. So we're shooting for something really straightforward. This is a wind graph. There's lots of bugs in this. So the wind directions are mixed up here with the arrows, but this is the wind speed and gusts. And that's kind of the sort of display that I'm shooting for. We can do complicated things or we can do simple things, but I'd like to keep them straightforward. Okay, so that was a lot of jabbering on my part. Have we got any questions about any of this, about the models, about the experimental site, or about the powder picker epic weather mobile-friendly website we're trying to build? It's called Epic Weather. Yeah. Okay. Question?
I got a question. Sure. So when you started Powder Picker, you've gone through many iterations since the beginning of it. Thank you for it, by the way. It's been super fun to watch and entertaining and great information, and it's gotten more valid as it's gone. I think you're mainly on Instagram now. Is that it? Tell me about your journey between the different, how did you land on that?
Okay, question about the journey. Well, it came from years of banging away at this on my own and just publishing on YouTube, and then eventually Instagram, and thinking that someone would want to sponsor me, otherwise, because there's no one doing what I do here or trying to do here. And I thought, this is a big enough resort, surely someone will jump in and sponsor me. And at one point, Substack, which is growing in popularity, added a video component. So shortly after Substack added that, I thought I could monetize this going through Substack. And then last year, Joey Gibbons from Gibbons Whistler jumped in to sponsor. So that's where I'm at right now. And I can look for a sponsor at any time because I'm in talks with Joey right now about that. Yeah, for year 2. Okay. So it was a long journey of banging away on my own, and then heading to Substack, and then jumping back, thankfully, with a sponsor, which allowed me to publish freely to everyone. Yeah.
Hey, David.
Hey, just as you're talking about sponsorships, please tell us how many unique hits you get every day, how many people are seeing your site.
Sure. Well, I'm no expert at this this business, but mostly now, I would say recently, I'm getting 5,000 to 8,000 views a day on Instagram. And the Substack following is the really loyal one. I've got about 1,500 subscribers. It's totally free. It's just a different way of receiving the forecast. So I get about 1,500 there. So I'm still below 10,000, which is an important number, but this is a small audience that I'm appealing to. It's very specific, but That's about the height of it now. Now, when I go back and I look at some videos, and here's the frustrating part, I can spend a lot of time on these videos, and I spend too much time. You can just ask my wife. But sometimes it's little 3 or 4 second clips when I've captured something that I don't even understand that go nuts. So one of my videos has 400,000 views, and it's a 4-second clip of the issue at Spanky's, which I happened to capture someday, and it generated a lot of angst and anger and back and forth, and it drove the numbers through the roof on it. So I've had a couple of videos in the 200,000 to 300,000 range, but one just nearing 400,000. Okay. Any questions about the weather?
Do you have any comment on the bizarre winds we had lately? I mean, 15th of December, and also more recently, 7th heaven gusting up to 180, 187 kilometers an hour. That's over 50 meters per second.
Yeah.
And that was ongoing. Has this got anything to do with El Nino, La Nina, blah, blah, the atmospheric pineapple bombardment or anything?
Well, I'll go back to the fellow I said who noticed, was an excellent forecaster, and noticed this correlation between warm ridges in winter followed by Arctic outbreaks. And he was famous for also always being able to say, I don't know. And that's the best answer you can give in weather a lot. And I would say, I don't know how to attribute that, except it's part of the variability of weather. You know, weather is just up and down, and it's amazing for sure, because I saw that. I think the anemometers cut out at about 180 kilometers per hour, I believe. I've seen them up, and they never go past 180. And I heard some guys who were on the mountain that day suggesting they were over 200. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you trust the instruments when things are going that fast. So yeah, I really can't explain it, except that it's probably happened for thousands of years here. And we just weren't there to record it. So nothing special there. Phenomenal event. It's one of the things that gets forecasters like me interested in the weather, especially as kids. It's extreme weather, but it's always been there. It just does that. Yep.
In the development of your predictive model, what has seemed to be the most accurate between winds, precip, temps, and what maybe has shown the most variability?
Sure. Well, last year was phenomenal with the precipitation amounts. I think we missed 3 storms. This year it's been a little bit different, but far and away the precipitation amounts somehow have been the most successful. And I really thought temperature and precipitation, or temperature and wind rather, was going to be easy. Turns out they're not so easy. So we're still, trying to figure out the best way to do things. But so far, the thing that encouraged us really was the precipitation forecast, which should be the hardest thing to do. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks so much, David. Let's, can you go to the next slides for us? All right, I guess it's time for the raffle. A big thank you to all of our presenters, to Powder Picker David Jones and Gabe and Jerome and Eric. If you bought raffle tickets, please stay, because we're going to do the raffle right now and provide those. A big shout out to Tim Smith, who's been doing the live streaming for us. And of course, as we go into the raffles, Gwen is going to come up here in a moment. But again, I really can't emphasize enough how much our sponsors mean to us, and Evo for providing this space, and Arc'teryx, and of course Polaris and Klim and Atomic, Extremely Canadian, Granite, Profile, Whistler Blackcomb, Cetus. Yeah, it's fantastic.